Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear friends, dear participants, dear partners, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this virtual session on voluntary local reviews, next steps for a sustainable urban future. I shouldn't even say virtual because that's the way we do things these days, right? So it's a real pleasure and a real honor for me to be here. This session is organized by UN Habitat and the Moscow Urban Forum. And I would really like to thank the Moscow Urban Forum on behalf of UN Habitat for this wonderful partnership and the joint work that has led us to hold this very important session, despite the extremely challenging year and extremely challenging circumstances that we faced in 2020. A bit of housekeeping. First of all, this session is being broadcasted on Room 1 of the Moscow Urban Forum website. Simultaneous translation is available in English and in Russian. And we will have a chance to have some questions and answers from the public. We're going to open the floor. So for those that are following live from the website, don't hesitate to submit your questions to the speakers. I will take them up as best as time will allow and pose them to all our speakers today. And this is a brilliant panel, so feel free to ask them difficult questions. Today's panel brings in very, very different and very interesting experiences. In my role at UN Habitat and my engagement on this voluntary local reviews process, I've had a chance to listen to many of these and learn from many of these experiences: Hawaii, Helsinki, Barcelona, Rio. And together today, I hope collectively we will learn more from them about what worked for them, what didn't, what processes the VLR has triggered within the local administration, the local community, and how the VLR could be a tool to support recovery from this pandemic, which is really the big elephant going forward. We have to leapfrog to a different future, a more resilient future. And how can the VLR be an instrument in that process? And I hope ultimately we will inspire many, many other local governments, Asian governments, to join this VLR movement. For UN Habitat, the VLR really is a very important instrument that serves multiple purposes beyond the monitoring and reporting function. We see VLRs as a multidimensional tool touching upon all key elements of the SDG implementation process. They have the potential to foster awareness, to build engagement and advocate around the SDGs. They can help break administrative silos. We have many city representatives here. I hope they will speak to this breaking silos, dimension of the voluntary local reviews. They're also a tool for strategic planning and prioritization. Where should you be putting your investments to get the maximum impact on the SDGs? Fundamentally, that is the question. And I think on a global scale, the VLRs amplify local government voices in the international arena on the Agenda 2030, and are becoming an important vehicle, an important instrument for this conversation between multiple levels of government. So I think that's also very important. With this in mind, UN Habitat supports the VLR movement in many different ways. One is, of course, we support them through direct technical assistance to a number of cities on building up the VLR reports through a very, very robust methodology. But also we lead the development of normative guidance of resources, pulling together all these rich experiences and somehow collating them, consolidating them, and sharing them more widely. We've already published a first volume of these comparators with UCLG, and we're on to develop a second, which actually talks about a very interesting dimension, which is the link between the VLR and the VNR. And I hope that some of you will address that in this conversation today. We're also looking at particular tools and resources around VLRs and COVID-19 recovery, VLRs and gender. And I think this is really one of the most exciting pieces of work, new pieces of work that we're doing at UN Habitat, and I'm very, very proud of that. Two important initiatives before I conclude. One is what we call the SDG Cities Program at UN Habitat, which is really pulling together a harmonized urban monitoring framework around the SDGs and the urban agenda, the VLRs, as the basis for a comprehensive programming support to cities to identify catalytic projects, as I said, to matchmake these with investors and to assess the impact of these on the SDGs. And within that, the second is really that global harmonized monitoring. But too much about me, too much about UN Habitat. We are here to listen to our experts, our voices from the trenches, people who've done this, people who will tell you what this process is about and how it has changed or transformed their cities and their communities. So without further ado, let me start inviting my panelists. I will introduce them as we go along. First of all, I have Celeste Connors, the director of Hawaii Green Growth USA. Celeste, welcome. The experience of Hawaii is unique in so many ways. Hawaii is a state government, so you have to deal with a sort of slightly different set of challenges than city governments. You're a group of islands, but the VLR is built on a very extensive participatory process, and I'm sure it wouldn't have been easy. So tell us a little bit about how you went about developing your voluntary local review, and then how do you plan to continue working on the sustainable development goals. All speakers, I will give you five minutes initially, 5-6 minutes, and I hope that you will have a chance to build on some of what you say as part of the discussion that follows. So please bear with me, and let's try to keep it to 5 minutes. Celeste, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, aloha, Shipra, and to colleagues. I'm just delighted to be here with all of you today. And there's absolutely a diversity of individuals on the call representing different aspects of government, civil society, business. And so to have the opportunity to share about Hawaii's experience in this is really great. And I'm going to ask our colleagues if we can show some slides that can actually help demonstrate what it is that Hawaii has been up to. So this is an image here of the Aloha Plus Challenge. What's fascinating is that actually prior to the UN SDGs being agreed in 2015, Hawaii had its own locally and culturally appropriate framework for sustainable development. We had actually launched our initiative in 2014 as a public-private partnership. So our partnership was actually formed in 2011. It came from the APEC summit that was hosted in Honolulu. And it actually came at the tails of the 2008 financial crisis, Shipra. So if you think about where we are now and where we were then, we were emerging as a green growth recovery platform. And despite green being the name, Hawaii Green Growth is actually informed by the OECD report. So we've been working now for over a decade on a green growth recovery, which actually positions us quite well to take on the challenges of a COVID recovery that needs to be done in an equitable, resilient, and green and sustainable way. So the Aloha Plus Challenge was agreed by all 4 of our mayors and the governor and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So it's really deeply rooted to our indigenous host culture and island values. So if you go to the next slide, it will actually demonstrate what it is that we are. It's the public-private partnership. It's really about political leadership. It's actually about the public-private partnership itself, which is civil society, business, and government entities. And what it is, we actually track progress. I'll share a little bit more about our dashboard. So we undertook a multi-year process, short-term consensus building to develop long-term goals, and what emerged were our 6 priority goals. And those very elegantly roll up to all 17 SDGs, which we'll show in the dashboard. So in order to decide what you're going to measure, you need to understand, they say you measure what matters. So we really went to the community to find out what matters to our community. And in these convenings, we made sure that we broke across the silos. If we were talking about our clean energy goal, we had our waste experts there are natural resource management, education. They had the folks that were actually working in agriculture with the executives of our airlines together over a 2 or 3 day period. And what emerged were the metrics and indicators that we decided to track. So all of this led to, if you go to the next slide, which is very exciting. A lot of our colleagues here are working on this, but when the Deputy Secretary General announced the Local 2030 initiative, we were delighted to be invited to be one of the Local 2030 hubs in Hawaii. And I think a lot of that was premised on what was already in place. What were communities already doing that could serve as models? Myself, having previously served in the Obama administration as the Director for Energy and Climate, actually working on the Sustainable Development Goals in early stages pre-Rio +20, I understand it's critically important that these goals do actually connect to the community. I grew up in Hawaii. I'm delighted to be back here, and therefore to see it really happening on the ground and to connect that large-scale multilateral commitment to action on the ground is really important. So Hawaii is delighted to be a Local 2030 hub, and if you go to the next slide, this is the dashboard that I was talking about. Now, what's exciting and unique in our process is that we're tracking progress on the dashboard. I'll share more about this later, but this is on the state.gov website, and you can go in to find all the data in there. We're going to show a brief video that shows you a little bit more about this, because this, Shipra, is what has informed our voluntary local review. And the final slide will just show the cover of our voluntary local review. The voluntary local review pulls from the dashboard. So the final slide, if you could click on that, might not be working. Let's just go to the video, if the video works. And as we pull up the video, and if it doesn't work, essentially what it does is it describes that the dashboard is something that we are now working with through as a Local 2030 hub with an organization called the Global Island Partnership that works with island leaders to actually scale these locally and culturally appropriate platforms, the partnerships, and actually the dashboard. So we are working with Esri, and Esri is an online platform that we have here. The fact that it's on the state.gov website shows that political accountability. So let me stop talking if the video is running. We'll be happy to share this in the link afterwards, Shipra. So I'll keep to my time. We'll share the video with folks. Is the sound working?
Thanks very much, Celeste. That was very, very inspiring. And I think for me, two big things. One is, of course, the integration of SDGs in the local plan, the local policy, rather than them being something separate that the local government is working on and trying to track desperately along with everything else that you need to track for local development, right? So that, I think, is to me one big takeaway from this. That's an important factor. And the other, I'm just blown away by your systematic approach to this. So thank you very much for sharing. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and a lot of interest in this. So we'll take those as they come. But thank you. Let me go right along to Sana Marianti. Sanna-Maria, you are the Director of Strategic Initiatives in Helsinki, and you're one of the pioneers in this whole VLR space. You were the first city to develop, the first European city to develop a VLR, with New York and Helsinki sort of leading the way, leading the charge. Your experience has been inspiring for many cities. Tell us a little bit about, what were the challenges, because you were doing it for the first time, because there's a number of resources now that were not available then. And how do you see this going forward? What do you intend to do in terms of replicating this, making it cyclical? How do you see the whole VLR approach in Helsinki and in Finland, perhaps, going forward? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you for the great introduction. Thank you for the inspiration, Celeste. I think that was really a good walkthrough of everything, all the issues that we should be considering as well. As you said, we have been the second city in the world to create a VLR, to commit to doing a VLR. And we are currently in the process of creating our second VLR. And it's incredible to see what a different process it is now. When we started together with the City of New York, we got a lot of support from them. We got a lot of expertise from them, but there was really no global community. There was no global platform or a global movement of cities that we could go back to or have this dialogue with. And now, only 2 years later, it's really quite incredible to have a global movement of cities from all around the world joining the movement, making the movement their own, finding new ways to use the VLR as their tool, finding new ways to communicate about it, and still kind of staying true to the values of the original Agenda 2030 and the commitment to action. I think one of the most important things for Helsinki moving forward has been that the city's movement is rooted on creating action and making sure the Agenda 2030 goals actually become reality. So for us, it has never been about creating a report or a review. Even though it's great to have one, it's really more about how you use it as a tool and what delivery you are able to create through it. So for us, it's a very much a strategy tool. And like Celeste described, it's also a way to communicate and connect with our community and making the SDGs real and actionable to ordinary people. Kind of creating the bridge from, okay, this is my normal life, these are the SDGs and the global community. How do these things communicate and connect with each other? And that's very much a communication exercise, but it's also a community exercise in a sense that the city of Helsinki, for example, is responsible for almost every walk of life. We take care of the elderly, we take care of children, we educate children, we create a lot of jobs, we connect with people on every level of society. And that means that we are also able to deliver a lot of SDG action on a wide range of societal activities. And that's why it's so important to connect this local work directly with people. Another point I want to bring in is that this has also been for us a way to communicate and connect with the global community as a whole. The SDGs and the VLRs, regardless of how you've actually executed the process or what your report looks like, is a global language that allows cities to have these conversations in a very much different fashion that we used to have, and has also created us a platform at the UN, which has been an incredible journey together with the UN Habitat, UCLG, and other organizations that have been supporting us, that we are now also able to have these conversations directly with the United Nations. I think if you look at the COVID-19 situation and us all trying to build back better and greener and in a more sustainable fashion, I think if you've already done a VLR, it's going to be a very important tool. But if you're still considering it, I think there's a lot of points there why you should tackle it together with the building back recovery phase, because it really can guide a lot of activities and give you a lot of systemic changes, systemic possibilities to create real change in this situation. For us, it's also always been about collaboration with our national state. The state of Finland has done 2 VNRs. They've been very innovative in their process. And this was the first time actually this year when they did their second VNR that cities were included in the process. And the Helsinki, Espoo, and Turku VLRs were part of this national reporting, which really kind of solidified our collaboration with the state of Finland on this important issue. Having said that, not every city has that luxury. Not every city in the world is able to go back to their national governments and work with them on this issue. So I think us as cities and as a global movement have to also consider those cities who are spearheading the Agenda 2030 action in their own countries and where they might not be able to receive a support from their national governments. And I think in those cases, we as community must step forward and really carefully include those cities who are, struggling to get this done on their own or receiving very few supports from their national governments, or the national governments are not currently engaged in VLRs. So I think this whole movement is based on action. It's based on moving forward. It's based on community, and it's a very pragmatic way of delivering Agenda 2030 results. And I think it looks very much a city movement, and it's a great contribution to the voluntary national reviews that have been gone for years.
Thank you very much. That is just amazing. I like what you said, that if you're even considering a VLR, this is a great time to start. Because you can link it up with your Build Back Better plans, your post-COVID recovery plans. And I think two other things. One is the VLRs, I never thought of it that way, but the VLRs as a bridge between my normal life and this huge, faraway global agenda of the SDGs. I don't have water to in my house. This is the problem. It has something to do with the global agenda, and I think this is one. And the other one being this global language that for sharing between cities, but also the global language for cities to speak to the multilateral system in their own language, which I think is part of the whole agenda of inclusive multilateralism that we're talking about. UN 75 years of the United Nations. The next 75 have to be different from the first 75. And I believe that the VLRs have offered this opportunity for cities to come to the table in a whole different. So thank you very much. That experience shows the way to many cities, I'm sure. Let me move right along and invite our third speaker, Mr. Miquel Rodriguez Planes, who is the Commissioner for the 2030 Agenda at the city of Barcelona in Spain. Now, of course, Barcelona is leading, one of the European cities leading on SDG efforts generally. And tell us a little bit, about your experience or your plans or your, vision for the VLRs. But also Spain is committed to doing a VNR in 2021. Sana Maria just talked about the relationship between a VLR and a VNR and how it's worked very well in Finland. How do you foresee, and what efforts are you making to connect with that VNR, possibly going forward as the city of Barcelona? Easy questions, right? Miquel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shipra, and thank you, the city of Moscow, for inviting us. Well, I think that you gave me some questions that are quite broad. So from them, I will play a little bit. Okay. So the thing I would say, when we start implementing the VLR that we just approved, the first VLR we just approved now in October, the main challenge that we saw, I think it was to engage the public administration, to make understand that the 2030 agenda was a priority for our politicians. And I think this is something that I don't know in the other ones, but in our case, when we started, we were like 11 years to 2030. So that means almost 3 mandates. So for the politicians, this is quite far in their reality. So we needed to try to engage them here, and to solve this problem, we use it 2 kind of boards. One, an internal one, like a steering committee with the managers that were attached to the politicians, so to make them understand what we're talking about, and also with them to create this VLR, to work it together. It has to be something, like Celeste said, breaking silos and working together between the different bodies of the administration. And a second board we created was an academic advisory board. And I think that this one was very crucial because this one is formed more than 30 doctors from social branch, but also economic, technician, environmental one, that are very important people in Barcelona. And they have like a moral superiority, if I can say that. And this help us to make the other people, the politicians, to understand why this was so important. But I think that the other challenge that we had, it's to also to understand what is the 2030 agenda about. And we say it's about reaching the triple sustainability, not only the environmental one, but also the social one and the economic one. And when we say that, okay, the question is how we do this, and we try to make them understand that what we're talking about is to, when we deploy a policy, we have to do it thinking about the three branches of sustainability: the environmental one, but also the economic impacts and the social impacts, and this in each of the kind of policies. So from here, what we did, it's to adapt the VLR, the Agenda 2030 to Barcelona reality, and by doing so, what we did is try to see how our programs were already there, how they fit to the agenda. But another thing that we did is to look at the 169 targets one by one, and to adapt them one by one to the agenda, to Barcelona. And here we decide that 139 are, Barcelona can say something about them, can try to reach them on our own way and to adapt them. And another thing so at the end, what we had, and I'm very proud, I'm going to show it here, we have this, our VLR, it's more than 250 pages with a lot of indicators and KPIs and a lot of things. What we have now, it's a draw of what kind of city we want in 10 years' time. But as you said, and also Sana Mari said, we have the COVID here, we have the pandemic, and this like maybe changed everything. To be honest, I think that it changed not too much, because the pandemic just put some priorities above other ones, but all the challenges that we have with the pandemic are challenges that we already had in the agenda. But I think that one thing that is very important is that the pandemic is a threat for cities. It's a very strong threat for cities, because people feel more insecure in cities because there's a probability of a higher contact, a higher human contact in cities. So there's people thinking about, hey, which will be the future of cities? Do I have to live in cities? Are we going to move all to Hawaii? No, with Celeste or or some places with more nature and far from the rest of the people. To be honest, I think that this will not happen, or at the end, people will come back to the cities. But for sure, in cities, what we have to do is we have to become more secure, or you can say it in another way, we have to become more sexy and keep people attracted to live, to work, to be in cities. And one way to be attractive or to be sexy, it's to guarantee a good environment, a good climate, a good air in our cities. So we need to do this energy transition. And here the VLRs is a good policy, a good guideline. And for example, in Barcelona, what we have designed an investment fund in energy transition that we hope that this investment fund is 50 million from Barcelona City Councils, 100 million, from the private sector, and we will deploy photovoltaic panels and energy retrofitting in buildings. The result will be like taking out from our street 19,000 cars per year. So we hope that this will be successful. But I would say that this is possible thanks to having a VLR that is at the end and a strategic plan for the rest of the years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting what you said, that it's really about using the SDG targets to define the city we want in 2030. So really as a tool for visioning. But in all these webinars that have been happening around COVID these last few months, one thing is very clear, that the pandemic has spotlighted the urgency of sustainable urbanization like never before, because the fundamentals of bad urbanization, inadequate housing, lack of basic services, urban sprawl, dependency on private cars, all of this has come out very, very strongly in the pandemic. And the other thing that it has done is deepened existing inequalities. So anybody who says that pandemic recovery or SDGs, it's not a real choice. SDGs are the way to go for pandemic recovery, and the VLRs can help us with that. But also your link with not just the Agenda 2030, but Paris, the climate goals, the energy goals, the mitigation is extremely important, an extremely important factor. So thank you very much for those insights. And let us now move to our last of the four presenters, after which we will have a quick reflection on the four presentations, a discussion on the presentation. So our fourth speaker today is Daniel Glitzen Manchebo de Araujo. I am sorry if I have butchered your name. My apologies. The head of the planning office of Casa Civil Municipality of Rio de Janeiro. Daniel, since 2017, you and Habitat and the City of Rio have worked together on advancing the SDGs. Tell us a little bit about the process of formulation of the VLR, and how do you intend to take it forward in this post-pandemic world? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shipra. I will present some slides and share my presentation. One moment, please. Oh, thank you, City of Moscow and Habitat to invite us. Thank the colleagues of this table and who is assisting us. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to present the case of the City of Rio. We are very happy for the results of this process of the local SDGs in the city. My speech will address two main points. The first one is the contextualization about the Sustainable Development Plan, PDS. This is the main instrument that relates the 2030 agenda into the reality of the city. The second one is beginning of the process of monitoring the 2030 agenda in Rio. A brief summary of Rio, the second largest city in Brazil. Rio has 6.7 million inhabitants, and in the metropolitan region, there are 12 million inhabitants. Rio sustainability corridors are territory landmarks that indicate the priorities for action in the municipal territory. We have a planning and sustainability system. The Sustainable Development Plan, PDS, is a part of this system. It is the plan responsible for defining the path to be trailed in the long term. PDS establishes visions and aspirations for 2050 and targets for 2030 in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Our plan has been built with 40 local agencies from a Planning and Sustainable Development Committee. PDS has supported by several external partners since the beginning of its construction, like UN Habitat, C40, and others. People's participation has been since the beginning. More than 40,000 people were engaged. We created a platform for citizen participation called participa.rio. We receive contributions from more than 30,000 children and have several social participation meetings with parents in schools. And it's very important for us to hear the people and the child. The vision of the child is it's very important for us. Our planning is based on 3 cycles, and the first guided by the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. We are doing a very detailed job considering the 169 goals and more than 240 indicators of the agenda. Based on this work, the first monitoring report on the agenda has been made, and we have 134 goals that are also related to these global goals and their indicators. We understand that this long and medium-term agenda is a transversal agenda. We have 5 main pillars articulated with all the SDGs. The first one, longevity and quality of life, climate change and resilience, equality and equity, cooperation and peace, and governance. We show more information, some information that support the transversal teams. It's important to mention that Rio has very advanced geographic information system, and a large part of this monitor is mapped. Rio City already has extensive experience in monitoring projects and indicators. However, some indicators will need to be created in case where the existing data is not yet adequate for finalistic assessment. We will follow some result of the first monitoring report of the 2030 agenda launched at the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi in March this year. For example, in compliance with Goal 11.1, we currently have 3 projects underway. Favela Bairro, it's a program to urbanize favelas, providing them with infrastructure and public equipment, serving about 90,000 dwellings. Housing production program, which has already built more than 170,000 dwellings in the city, and land regularization program that reached 16,000 benefits dwelling. Other example is about 11.2 goal. Extension of BRT corridors will reach 105 kilometers, 50 kilometers, sorry. And about goal 11.6, 280 towns disposed in landfill and 7% recycling. In terms of governance, we understand it's very important to engage people. Then the number of people engaging in social participation process is also one of the indicators chosen to monitor compliance with the 2030 agenda. Thank you, Shipra. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I love this school and children engagement emphasis. It's phenomenal. You know, we are planning 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead. These are the people we are planning for. And to make a conscious effort to hear their visions is really a stellar example of what we would call in development jargon, inclusive participation. This is inclusive participation in real life. So thank you very much. I think that's very interesting. Another interesting thing that comes out is also from yours and then also from Miguel's presentation is the importance of choosing. You know, you said you had about 134 of your targets which aligned with the SDG targets. Miguel, you mentioned about 139 of the 169 targets were, and I think this is quite important, that many cities would become, you know, would be intimidated saying, do we have to do all 169? Do I have to align everything with everything? And I think the importance of choosing the most important ones for your context and then aligning them is another one that comes out. So thank you for those insights. Let me now invite my colleague, Luis Herrera Favela, who's the lead specialist for the City Prosperity Initiative in Human Habitat. He's He's definitely one of our monitoring guys. Luis, you've been very involved also with our own VLR work. What have you heard from these presentations? And if you can maybe glean for us a few, 5 or 6 major points that are coming out, that are standing out to you from what you've heard, from the experience of these cities, that would be great. Luis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shipra. Thank you. Zdravstvuyte. Hello, everyone, friends and colleagues. Yeah, I mean, just allow me perhaps to start with some background. Shipra, I think it's very interesting because if we think, for example, what happened in 2016, 2017, we have around 5 VLRs presented. And so far, I mean, we're around 40 VLRs presented at this year. So that is actually a very, very important increase. And what I want to show, to highlight with this number is not only the number of VLRs, of course, but let's say the willingness of local governments and cities in embracing SDGs. As Sanna Marin mentioned, it's not about the document, it is what is behind. And this is actually something extremely relevant. What I want to highlight from my colleagues that presented, and also it is something that we have seen in the research and working with many cities, is a crucial, let's say, common element on all these VLRs, on all these reports, that they are basically creating a local narrative through an own voice. And this is something extremely important. That is basically the cornerstone to, let's say, trigger the localization process. So that is a very, very important common element in all these elements. What I would like also to mention is 2 areas of opportunities. As many of my colleagues here have mentioned, we are, let's say, at the beginning perhaps of a second generation of VLRs. We have several lessons learned from previous ones, and of course new challenges, COVID among others. And I would like to bring 2 areas of opportunities perhaps. One is the role of private sector. I think is extremely interesting. Now that we've seen many of these experiences, several private companies have also done very, very interesting things. A very recent report from Ethical mentions that 60% of big corporations in Europe have already, let's say, aligned their corporate response through the SDGs. And now the big question is, are VLRs capitalizing those efforts? Are VLRs appropriately bringing, let's say, these initiatives from private sector? That is something really interesting to think about, particularly if we consider the financial resources that might be there. A second area of opportunity, of course, very, very peculiar interest for the Agency for UN Habitat, is the territorial approach and the necessity to strengthening this territorial approach. In general, let's say, VLRs respond to the question, what are the main challenges concerning SDGs, right? The territorial approach also responds to the questions, where are those challenges located in cities? And that is extremely relevant because, again, I mean, this idea of where are those elements located is extremely related to the idea of localizing SDGs. So that is a very, very crucial challenge we have ahead. The crucial thing here is related to data, is related to the evidence, because not in many cases, particularly in developing countries, the availability of disaggregated data is actually scarce. But creativity is not, and there are actually really interesting things that we can do. And there are really interesting exercises in which surveys perhaps mitigate this lack of data. Also, other elements, collecting, let's say, own data and so on. But definitely, and as you previously mentioned, since we know that spatial inequalities is something extremely important, now more than ever, this element of the territorial approach is extremely relevant. So that would be all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. Absolutely fundamental. The territorial approach, the role of the private sector are absolutely fundamental in taking this forward. Let me put one question maybe to each of the panelists. And if you can give us a very short answer to that, and then maybe a closing remark. What is the link? How has the VLR helped in orienting the municipal budgets? Some of you mentioned projects. Daniel, you mentioned the projects that are going on in Rio, for example, and others. But really, is the VLR there yet in terms of becoming the fundamental tool to reorienting the way you look at municipal budgeting? I can see Miguel shaking his head vigorously. Miguel, I will start with you. Is there that link already, or do you foresee a link in the future?
Well, I foresee to link it in the future. Right now, what we're doing. So imagine we just achieved to convince huge structures such as the City Council of Barcelona to say, hey, we have to think about 2030, and we have to think about these 139 targets and all these things. So the thing that we're doing right now, that we already did a first exercise, is to see how the previous budget was achieving the SDGs. And that was very nice to see how far we have in Spain. You were saying we will have a national VLR, a VNR in Spain 21. But previous to this VNR, we have several monitors on how cities are reaching SDGs, right? So with one of these monitors, we compare how far we were in Barcelona to how much money we're putting in these SDGs. And we're using this baseline to do it for the next budget, for the previous budget, to see how much money are we putting in each of the targets. And at least, I don't know, I wish that we will be able to make a SDG budget, but if we're not able to do this, at least just analyzing, evaluating the already existing budgets in terms of SDG might help us to change some priorities in kind of resources for the SDG. So this second option will be a good one, even if we would like to have these SDG budgets.
Very nice. Thank you for laying out also a visionary target for the future in terms of that's the way to go. Sana Marie, what has been your experience on this link to budgets and municipal resources and where they are spent?
I think I'm on the same lines as the previous speaker. For us, the first VLR was very much about like search and discovery, really trying to reveal what the city actually is already doing and what it's potentially not doing. And it's a very holistic way of looking at things. And I think it would be even difficult for us to pinpoint exactly what budget items, kind of really support SDG action and what are just supporting the mainstream work of the city, so to speak. So I think the most important part would be to see an improvement. So instead of being totally accurate and totally punctual on reviewing and revealing how the budget is based on SDGs, I think we are better off if we're trying to find improvement and create a pathway to those targets that are not necessarily, that are underrepresented maybe in the budget currently. So I would put more emphasis on finding a way forward with the targets that we are underperforming. And I think that's a realistic way for us moving forward. I really salute Los Angeles's effort to really go through their budget and really reveal how their budget coincides with the SDG targets. But I think we probably are not able to do the same here.
No, it's important that we choose a pathway that works. And as you said, perhaps the focus on outcomes and getting the right outcomes and the budget being a means to that. But also recognizing that we've just said that the SDGs and our normal development priorities are not different things. They're just different ways of looking at the same thing. So I think moving forward, perhaps some more conversations around this might help cities to look at, and I see this as a potential growth area in terms of thinking to take this to the next level. I see Luis taking furious notes because he's going to have to work on this. Let me go to Danielle and then to Celeste on this question of budgets.
Celeste? Or me?
Danielle, why don't you start?
Yeah. Well, this is a big problem, I think. The money to implement the agenda, and especially today, because due the pandemic, we have a very big crisis in the municipality and another locals in another cities in Brazil. But we understand that we have to establish many partnerships with the private sector and involve the population. I think it's critical to implement the agenda. In addition, I agree that budget instruments must support the SDGs. The city of Rio, it's doing this in this moment, for example, and I think it's important to involve the people. I can invest in in new trees in the city, but it's not. It's important to the people to is engaging in this investment, because it's not enough to only the government to do this. Understand? I think it's important to the people to it's engaged in these objectives, in these goals, to implement this agenda.
Very good, very important also with the whole conversation around the private sector engagement, the private sector with a big P and a private sector with a small p. You know, everybody who runs a small business in a city, everybody who contributes through their tax is an investor in the city. And I think it's quite important to make sure that all those investments are going in the right place with a conscious choice. So thank you for that. Celeste, you have the last word on this question.
Yeah, no, I think this is interesting in sort of two things. And I think the perspective from Hawaii is we're actually really talking about 4 mayors. So we did the first statewide voluntary local review in the United States, but it's the sum of the parts, right, of the 4 mayors and the governor. And I think the unique thing, and to my city colleagues here, is the sort of strength in numbers, that, you know, to look for the intersections even with fellow mayors, but also with the governor and civil society. So to the question of whether the VLR is yet informing budget decisions, I think hopefully soon, Sana Marie, maybe we'll get to part 2, but what it has actually demonstrated is where there are the gaps, right? So it was critically important that as Mikkel said, we have this benchmark data, which is why we presented our VLR both through a local frame, that this is the 6-year report of the Aloha Plus Challenge benchmark data. So you can actually see what the gaps are and look how are you going to close that delta by, making the right decisions with budget and resource allocation. So I think, when we look at our midterm, we plan to do a midterm review in 2022. And hopefully we'll see that progress incrementally, and then also where you can have larger impact. I think on the private sector side, absolutely. And this, I think, is packaged as shared value. We can't see the city or the city and county, in our case, working in isolation. So the goal is really how the VLR, how the SDGs, how it is framing a green growth and COVID recovery, but how there is that collective shared value. And we have a sustainability business forum. We have 24 of our CEOs, our publicly traded companies, our utilities, our banks. They've actually signed on to the SDGs and the Aloha Plus Challenge. connected to the Global Compact. Now, what's interesting, they want to be tracked on the dashboard. They want to actually demonstrate their commitment. And Luis, this could be connected to the broader discussion of ESG. How are the VLRs also tied into environment, social governance issues that many of our private sector partners are looking to achieve? So I think that intersection is really holistic. I think we have to, final thought is, I think we need to start where we have to meet the cities and start with where they're at. And a lot of our city government, our mayors, they have local resiliency strategies. The Oahu resiliency strategy is fabulous. It's actually showing, you know, it's really contextualized where we're experiencing our sea level rise, where we should build. It's where it's connecting to the SDGs is where we should actually start the conversation.
Great, thank you so much. I think those are very, very important thoughts. A last question, perhaps. We have a few more minutes, I've been told by the organizers, so just a couple of more minutes. I know that you're already doing, Finland, Helsinki is already doing its second VLR. What about the others? I know that, Mikael, you've just done your first. And Danielle, yours was done, I think, last year as the first. And Celeste, what are the plans for making this cyclical? Perhaps I'll start with those of you who've just done one for now. So Celeste, why don't we start backwards with you now?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we want to continue because we need to show the progress. And as I mentioned, we plan in 2022 to do a midterm review, which would be probably the next VLR for us. And what we really want to demonstrate is how we've made progress in those key areas in closing the gap. So it's certainly something we plan to do. We had just an example, I had a student reach out to us today, actually saying that he wanted to intern and actually look at a particular issue of waste in Kauai because he noticed in the VLR there was a challenge and a gap. So already we're actually having certain folks reach out to us informed by the VLR. So we definitely plan to do another one, probably 2022, which is the midterm point of our Aloha Plus challenge.
Very nice, thank you. Danielle, what about you?
Yeah, PDS is finished. We are concluded now in this month, December, and then we have the targets to 2030, and in the next year we have a new mayor in Rio, and we are in this moment engaged the new team of the secretaries and the others managers of the city to involve them in this agenda, to explain about the goals, the long-term goals, and especially in the next months, we are going to define the goals to the next 4 years, the next government. It's important to articulate the long-term goals to the short-term goals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. Mikael, first VLR done. When can we expect the next one?
Well, we expect to have the next one in July. So we want to have it one per year.
Wow.
And because we understand that this is the way to see how we're doing it. And especially now with the pandemic, I think that we even need more to have a stronger evaluation, because we know right now the KPIs that we have, the economic ones, but also the social ones, also the environmental ones, but even maybe the environmental ones are more exceptional due to the lockdown. But for the social and economic ones, we know that we're going to see a reduction of the KPIs so we really need to have it each year, and that is our goal. So here we are.
Fabulous, thank you. Sanamari, I have a slightly different twist to the question for you, because we've heard you're doing your second one. So actually, there are people who have asked this question from our participants. What is it that makes your second VLR very different from the first? You mentioned that they're very different, and what in your first mention, somebody's done obviously a very deep review of your first VLR, where you said you're going to further develop and add indicators in your second one. Have you done that? And what is your experience in terms of rolling it out from the first to the second time, and how has it evolved?
Thank you. Big questions. Well, first of all, what we're trying to do with our second VLR, and we are currently doing it, is to make it more fun. I think the first one was very kind of review-ish, and it was very strategic, formulated as a strategic tool. This is more geared towards actually speaking to people, making it understandable, giving examples. Hopefully we're able to create some sort of participatory tool, maybe a more visually appealing and participatory website, so that people are actually able to engage with the data and engage with the results in a more fun, Miguel's words, making it a bit more sexy in a way that people are actually excited to find out about it, and you just don't feel like forced need to engage with it. So that's definitely a topic we're working on. Another one, as you said, is the indicators. We spend a lot of time on aligning our current strategy with the VLRs and really kind of trying to find out what's relevant to us, how we can actually make the review work as a tool instead of just showing information. And that process took a long while for us during the first VLR, but now we've had more time. And that's really an engagement-based process. When you're really trying to develop these indicators, you're developing a language, you're developing a point of view, and you need to have the whole organization and the relevant experts participate in that process. It's a very kind of organic, fluid process instead of just creating indicators and sticking to them until the unforeseeable future. So that's one thing. The other aspect of developing indicators is that you still have to keep them relevant to others. So you don't want to like stretch them so far out that you end up with information that doesn't resonate with anybody else's VLRs or their processes. So it's kind of a balancing act, keeping it relevant to us, but also keeping it a relevant tool for global conversations and for others to learn from, and for us to learn in our process from others. I think the balance between fun and sexy and informative and transformational as far as serious data-based information collecting and reporting is the balancing act we're all struggling with.
Interesting, very, 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 very interesting. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to try the impossible task of trying to sum this up because this has been so rich. So my apologies in advance if I don't capture something super fundamental, but let me go through 5 or 6 points that I gleaned from this, which resonated with me going forward. First, the VLR as a tool of engagement and advocacy on the SDGs. That's very important. That's almost the first purpose for our communities, the bridge, as you called it, for our communities, cities, citizens, everybody to understand that these goals are something that have something to do with us and with our daily lives. So really an advocacy instrument. And in addition to that, the flip side of that, an instrument to co-create a future vision together. And the more inclusive, the more diverse the engagement of in these processes is, the more it'll be owned and the more the vision will also be owned. The goals will be owned and the vision will be owned. And I think you also mentioned either Celeste or one of the colleagues mentioned the importance of engaging, I think Mikael mentioned the importance of engaging political leaders across the spectrum, not just municipal officials, but this is for 10 years. You need all the political parties involved across the divide so that they own this process in sequence. So it's not just a horizontal, but it's also, across various kinds of cleavages and divides. That's one. The second, I think, linked to that is mainstreaming the SDGs in local policy. Moving on from that, the co-creation of a vision which actually mainstreams the SDGs. But even if there is not 100% alignment. And I want to flag that because, as you said, it has to be relevant to your context. It has to be relevant to your priorities, to your development priorities. So even if there is not 100% alignment, and here you said something, Celeste, about measure what matters, right? So as long as you're measuring what matters, but I want to flip that also and say that what you miss measuring will not matter and will slip under the carpet. So you have to make that balance between measure what matters to you today, but also highlight a few things that may not matter to everybody, but are important policy elements and choices that an administration makes. A third, I think, this whole false dichotomy between the choices that the false choices that we think we will have to make between building back better, COVID prevention and recovery, climate, and the Agenda 2030. There is no choice here. I mean, they're all ultimately we are making interventions that contribute to all of these at the same time. And building back better means building back greener, means building back more inclusive, means building back more resilient, etc. So I think that is important, and therefore there is no better time. If you haven't started a VLR, there is no better time than to do it now. So that's important. The fourth, I think, the spatial approach. Very often we forget that your how do we say it in Habitat? Your life, life prospects depend not so much only the family you're born in, but the neighborhood, the zip code you're born into, right? So it's really a lot of your opportunities, a lot of the inequalities that you face are spatial. And data in VLRs, that's the beauty that it's a voluntary local review, should be disaggregated and depicted spatially. You can say that 35% of the people don't go to school, but in particular neighborhoods, there'll be 90% of the kids not going to school. And in other neighborhoods, there'll be 5%. And that's very clear in the pandemic. We know in the United States, we know what happens in Africa, we know what happens in India, we know what's happening in Rio. We know that this is a very, very spatial dimension of how the pandemic has unfolded, has a very strong spatial inequality dimension to it. So it's very important. A fifth, I think, is the whole question around investments, both public investments through the budget and private investments to support the SDGs. And I recognize that we are a bit far from this whole discussion of budgets being aligned to the SDGs. But I think a good starting point is that you look at the gaps, you look at the outcomes you want, and then you make the investment towards those outcomes and potentially track back to see whether those investments are coming from the housing sector, because typically municipal budgets are organized in sectors. So then you track back and see where the most important investments or the most catalytic investments are coming from. So, Mikhail, I hope we will arrive at this SDG budget that you have talked about at some point soon in the future. And a link to that is your point about starting where cities are. Every city should start from where it is at, rather than from a false premise that it has to start from a certain level, or that us assuming that every city is at the same level. It doesn't work like that. You just have to start from where you're at and build up from that. And I think the last point is really this, what you emphasized is about making the next generation VLRs more fun, more sexy, but fundamentally, I think making them more engaging, more visual, more interactive, more relevant to the young people, to the different classes of citizens, speaking their language in that sense, so that they're not lost in policy language and bureaucratic, sort of documents. So I think fundamentally,
Я думаю, фундаментально.
Yeah, we're wrapping up. So we're, I think, keeping that in mind, that it is a transformative tool, but at the same time, it is something that really has to take everybody along and build that ownership for the long haul, not just in the short term. That, to me, is really the future of the voluntary local review and the future of sustainable development and sustainable urbanization that goes hand in hand with it. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers for letting us go over time. and stay well, stay healthy, stay engaged on the VLR process. It's a long road, but we need to do this together. Thank you very much again.